Good morning. This is series number 4 in our series of oxygenation and brain health. So this morning I want to talk about mitochondria. Mitochondria are tiny little single cell organisms that we absorbed in a harmonious relationship many millions of years ago. And these organisms provide nuclear level fuel for our systems to function. They take in oxygen and they spew out this incredible nuclear fuel. And they're wonderfully analyzed by scientists, how the different membranes and the 5 stages of processing the oxygen, what is involved, and more importantly, it has been discovered what happens when they don't get oxygen. And this is what I want to talk about today. The reason is that a lot of us don't want to admit that we don't get enough air. We don't take in enough breath. But through scientific fact and through other elements of evolution, combined with our industrialized plastic lifestyle, I'm trying to convince you and suggest that higher oxygen levels during the conscious state are all that we really need to focus on in order to achieve our very complex goals and visions, whatever they may be. The function of the frontal lobe is to make a lot of plans. The function of the rest of the brain, which needs all of that fuel that is mostly supplied by oxygen, does the work for us, makes it easy. And that's what we want. We want to achieve complex things. Why do they look so easy? Ultimately, they are easy because the brain, all the mechanisms that we don't really control, the only way we control them is through our input. And there are other parts of the elements of the brain that we can talk about that enable that input. The mirror neuron system, for example. You see someone do something and an instinctual part of your brain is doing it too. You're not even actually doing it, but the brain is mapping down what's being done and kind of copycatting it. So we need to fuel that part of the brain so that we can learn from these master observations. So back to mitochondria. Mitochondria are single cell little organisms. They have their own genetic code. It's very simple and it's very fragile. And all they need to survive is oxygen. When you look at aerobic tissue, oxygen demanding parts of our body, the brain, the heart, and the lungs, all function on high oxygen levels and of course those are the 3 main players in keeping us alive and functional and allowing everything else to perceive the world and deliver information and experience to the brain, which puts us in the moment, which puts us in the able to express experience, express emotion, express opinion, feelings, and to also perceive, experience, events, emotions, feelings at a conscious level. And we also have very strong instinctual processing of people and places and things and experience that's been very well defined by scientists and through brain imaging studies. So mitochondria take glucose, which is byproduct of food, and oxygen, which is the gaseous element in the air, pull those together and make this explosive energy, many units of this energy. And that's their function, and they do it very well. And that's just about all they do. They're pretty friendly little things that we've absorbed. We have hundreds and thousands of them in each cell, in aerobic oxygen greedy cells. In our muscles and such, they're dispersed throughout the muscles, and they're less so in the muscles because we don't need as much oxygen in our muscles and our peripheral body, but we do need a lot of oxygen in our heart, lungs, and particularly that brain. 30 to 35% of oxygen intake goes to the brain. It could be more. It should be more. So when we look at a brain cell, a brain neuron, it has a core. It has all sorts of mitochondria in it. But then it has branches that go out and deliver messages to other neurons. So we'll have a nice diagram of that. And of course, I have PowerPoints that give you some fabulous pictures of how this works. I'm just talking very simply, as simply as I can. So at the end of these branches are clusters of mitochondria. So they tend to bunch up and gather up at the end of synapses, or at the end of where the synapse, where messaging transfers from branch to branch, which goes to the center of the neuron and creates consciousness, experience, memories. It layers how to ride a bicycle and how to drive a car and how to ice skate, etc., how to do origami. Those clusters are mitochondria that are bunched together. So when we bring oxygen into the system, it is an all or nothing load, offload, and drop off system. So, and there's an oxygen. The more oxygen there is, the more it presses into these mitochondria clusters. So if we are low oxygen arena, then oxygen tends to offload only at the necessary spots for heart and lungs, for basic survival function. And that's okay when that's all we need in life. But if we want higher function and to perform well and to perform flawlessly with great ease and to bring in, to get a master's degree in neuroscience in 4 years after a career switch, and to move on to learning how to do complex origami, or learn how to work in new hobbies into our life, and to have more energy to spend with our families and friends while we are accomplishing all we need to do at our jobs without stress. Fear is not involved in an oxygenated system. There's no need for it. Fear and anxiety, stress, pushing to achieve something relies on non-oxygen based mechanisms. And we have those mechanisms. They're very strong, they're very powerful, and they are very toxic. Reactive oxygen species, oxygen radicals, leaking of the mitochondria releases these. Zinc is a metal that's released. These metals that are released, and oxygen that iron is part of the hemoglobin system, the blood delivery oxygen system. When there's no oxygen, it becomes toxic, and it binds to various elements that are released during hypoxia. Hypoxia, low oxygen, causes all the problems that shut down these mitochondria, lead to all diseases of the neuropathy pathways, and at the very least, complicate them. So doctors and scientists are looking at mitochondria first and foremost. The interesting thing about mitochondria is that they provide energy for all of the function that we have. It's not the only source of energy. With anxiety and fear-based hypoxic non-breath systems, we get like 2 units of energy for every molecule of glucose, food, that we put in. Combine that molecule of food, glucose, with oxygen, we get 36 units from mitochondria. So you can do the math and understand that oxygen will fuel these clusters at the end of synapses to do the work for us, to provide the energy that the work gets done. All this incredible subconscious procedural implicit work gets done while the frontal lobe is more of the rudder in function and task and planning. Dream big. And let the subconscious, paleo, older brain do the work. That's the idea. And so to explain a little further that mitochondria are very fragile. When they're deprived of oxygen, they will signal for their death, the death of their colony, and the death of the cell. And that cell ultimately does die. It has a potassium core when it dies. In the process of it dying, it signals for zinc to flood the system, zinc to be released from these terminals where they cluster. There are toxic levels of zinc at both presynaptic and postsynaptic areas of these terminals, these what they call dendrites. And that zinc binds with copper that is necessary for brain function. So copper is not being employed because there's not the energy to employ it. And iron binds with those other 2 metals. And this is what causes Alzheimer's plaques. So not having enough oxygen to maintain a pressure gradient to push into these clusters. You need, involuntary breath is just not enough. So you need more oxygen. Ultroxia, primoxia, I think is another word for it's hypoxia, normoxia. Primoxia, which is nice and, steady oxygen, getting regular exercise, yoga, meditation, being around family in a non-fear-based environment, aromatherapy. Remember we talked about aroma being the olfactory, being the most passive, easiest way to both get a breath and to hold the breath, that enables the oxygen to be pressed, to transfer into the lungs. Maintaining that oxygen, higher levels of oxygen in the brain, fuels these mitochondria clusters that enable high function in the brain. So that's the bottom line. We have 8 times more oxygen in our lungs. We have 8 times more potential for oxygen in our lungs than we actually use. What happens? We've talked about this before. I'll have a reminder right now. We have collapsed ribs. I've got collapsed ribs as I'm sitting here right now. Even though as a general rule, I stay oxygenated. I stay buoyant and expanded torso and take a breath before I do many or most things. It's an individual journey. It's a journey of commitment and of trust in that, knowing that a brain full of oxygen is going to deliver. And you don't have to worry or think that it's not going to get done, or feel you have to micromanage everyone and everything to get it done. Make a plan, work the plan. What do they say? A plan without the action is a fantasy, and action without a plan is a nightmare. So have a plan and stay oxygenated. So let's look at our stages of oxygenation, just to keep it simple. I want to give you a quick and easy way for that oxygen situation to, again, our ribs are collapsed. We're in that 1/8 area by necessity. The ribs are holding us down, holding our lungs hostage. We are a victim of this planet in a way. So what we want to learn to do is to stay buoyant and expanded torso and ride the gravity of this planet and stay oxygenated, as evolution has provided this beautiful curve that we're in. We want to stay on that curve. We don't want to shut that curve down and become other creatures. We want to stay on that evolutionary curve. Industrialization has really done a number on us, and we need to understand that and make some choices as to, whether we're going to succumb to the industrialized trajectory. I don't think it's a very pretty picture, to tell you the truth. It's full of anxiety and fear and low accomplishments. These mitochondria feed on oxygen. The gift of that to us is nuclear fuel. There's a reason 250 million years ago that happened. The world was highly anaerobic after the mass extinction, and it was slowly building up oxygen supplies again, oxygen reserve in the world. And single cell organisms were kind of springing up everywhere. Our mother cell chose, or somehow engulfed or began, a symbiotic relationship with these mitochondria that take a single molecule of oxygen and turn it into massive fuel. So that's what we are blessed with. We have millions of them in our body, and hundreds, thousands of them in each cell. Hundreds at these clusters that need even more oxygen. Before we get into our breathing exercises, one more thing about glucose, which is food-based. We have an abundant supply of that. We can live for 7 weeks without food. We have plenty of glucose in our brain. No problem. No problem with glucose reserve. Oxygen, we can live 7 minutes without. We only have a 2 to 3 time reserve of oxygen. Very limited reserve of oxygen in our brain. So what does that tell you? We run out of oxygen very quickly in the brain. So if we're not constantly taking it in, we're gonna not have enough. It's like constantly having to refuel your car. Just fill the tank up and keep it tanked up. That's why I say tank up. So we're going to get the ribs off of the lungs so we can breathe in with our arms over our head. The ribs are up, very good thing. And if you breathe all that air out, they'll collapse and the diaphragm will go concave, and we'll have that very small reserve, and the lungs are barely employed. So let's try that again. This time we're going to do something a little different. Hold your breath and put your arms down. Do not pass out on me, please. If you feel you're going to pass out, stop and go at it more gently. So we're holding our breath and we're getting very comfortable in this buoyant, expanded torso. Loosey-goosey, I say. Loosey-goosey. Let's try it again. Hold. Get very loosey-goosey, long neck, loose neck. This is a buoyant torso. This is ribs uncollapsed. Blow about half of that out, third of that out, and you need your abdominal muscles to maintain that. We have all sorts of muscles to maintain this. Absolutely. And to get comfortable with it and to trust it. that it's going to, the body is poised to take in more oxygen to deliver food for our mitochondria, which give us our fuel. We take in the glucose. The mitochondria take the oxygen and turn it into fuel, nuclear fuel. Okay, so our other stages of breathing are olfactory. I have a nice lotion on my hands, nice scented hand soap, or anything, a flower. Let's get some flowers around here, you know. The ocean, the salt in the ocean. I mean, it's hard to even imagine it. You have to have the salt. You have to have the input. Imagine you're foraging in the forest for food, fuel. Mushrooms are full of protein. I can't imagine that 100 years ago we weren't foraging for mushrooms often, because that's what gave us all sorts of adventures, including their poisonous ones too, as we know. But so the sense of nature, you know, it's hard to imagine those scents. You have to have those scents, because the olfactory system are also brain neurons. They regenerate too. And we'll talk about neurogenesis in another film. So olfactory, about 3/4. Remember the dermatomal? We were once on all fours. That's a big breath. It's a lot of breath. We came from all fours, and there are muscles to support breath on all fours. And then we got all fancy dancy and stood up straight so we could see over the bushes and rocks. And that opened our horizons. And mitochondria were fueling us the whole way with natural stimulus to keep us breathing and communicating with one another. So those are 3 big air intakes that I encourage you to practice. Keep those muscles open, you know, warm baths, anything to relax the muscles, swimming types of exercises. While you're exercising, breathe first and work on opening the musculature. I'm a firm believer in professional massage and acupuncture to optimize the muscles that can take these breaths, so that your body can do the work to keep the respiratory, the lungs filled there, and fuel the brain. Let's go on to let's do the 3 stages again. Do the last 2 stages, and then I will do some resonance to begin to explain a little bit how speaking is a very limited part of brain usage. When we speak, just a tiny little part of the brain goes blink, blink, blink. And we don't need air intake to talk. It's a tool. It can be considered a primitive tool. Cognition is not primitive. Putting words together and making sense of things takes another part of the brain. But speaking itself has limited air intake demands, limited resonance demands, and so we want to optimize our experience. When we sing, when we extended speech, singing is extended speech, la 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 la, so I can speak and I can just extend it and it's la. And that resonance really doesn't do much for my brain. It does a little bit for the very front of the brain, if it's depending on where you're placing your voice. Not very exciting. Speaking is okay, but it has its limits as far as conditioning the brain or stimulating the brain. So let's do our 5 stages, and I'll do a different kind of resonance. Singing, all sides of the brain, the cerebellum, the insula, seats of emotion, seats of conscious experience, the areas of the brain that scientists don't even know what they do yet are stimulated by singing. Singing also helps people recover from stroke. It just makes them feel good, like a drug, natural drug, releases dopamine, endorphins. And in my study with dementia patients, it improves cognition. So what more can we want with dementia patients? Significantly, as compared to listeners. And we'll show you that in another PowerPoint or lecture. So let's do our 5 stages. Olefactory. So we're we're passive involuntary. Olfactory. 3/4 of a cup, cup and a quarter, about 2/3, 3/4 of a cup. I do an upper breath, which is another 1/3 of a cup, and 1/4 of a cup. That's about as much air as I can get, you know, no more. And then that's as much as my body will expand too. But then la 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 Good morning. So what happens? My body can't go anymore. I sing that note and it feels like 30 cables are pulling me up. Why? I believe it's because oxygen is being pushed into the lungs, and that makes me feel even more upright, even more taller, even more expanded, even more evolved. And different ranges of the voice. A tiny little squeal is made here, but the register of the sound, the opening of the vocal cords determine the pitch. And when I'm singing down here, I literally feel my sternum resonating, and that affects my vagus nerve, my heart and lungs, and it literally shakes those dendrites, those terminals where all synaptic function and chemical release. Not only does it oxygenate those mitochondrial clusters, it helps them do their job by shaking loose whatever's ready to be released there. It's a ticket to health. Going up, I literally feel resonance, vibration on my hand and the back of my neck. And you better believe that brainstem is tissue that is being vibrated, massaged to an extent. No, but I call the Julia Child School of Fine Singing. Now all this time you want to be the feeling of rolling air to create maximum vibrations. I can go into detail in another video, and I certainly will, because I was a professional singer for many years, and I can sing for a very long time. It's not just 1 or 2 notes that I sing. Those notes, you take what you did in one note and you build on it in the next note, and you build on it in the next phrase, and next thing you know, you're singing Carmen at the Met. So that's how it works for me. But you can take a degree of that and make it work for yourself too. The pituitary gland is right behind this resonance. So you're stimulating that. You're stimulating its function. You're stimulating whatever it's got released at the end of its terminals. That mitochondria will then resupply, and so the health benefits become very good. So speaking in this voice is one thing. sustaining that is not only supplying more oxygen, but maintaining the function of that arena. This is really thalamic area. We're going up, right? Thalamus. And also the vowels that you speak, E is different from O or A or Oo. Those kind of just circle back. E, O, A, Oo. They, can circle. They target various areas of the thalamus. It's pretty cool. And then going into higher notes. And again, a rolling air that rolls through the system, as opposed to being held with the tongue, like my tongue tends to hold if I don't get rid of the tongue. There's a lot of clarity that can be found in those sinus pockets of bone. So when you engage those sinus pockets, you are literally stimulating prefrontal cortex, and then higher. Too early for me to sing those notes, but that is the actual frontal visionary executive management, micromanagement working area. And it's very interesting. This area of the brain is not very dense. It's kind of the wild, wild west. We spoke about it before. So when you stimulate it, you're almost tilling the soil around the roots of these neurons, which momentarily disengages them. I know sopranos who are singing and they're like a little loopy. And I can get a little loopy when I sing up there for too long. But then in 24, 36 hours, things reroute, especially if you're good nutrition, rest, hydration, and continued oxygenation. They reroute and you become much stronger in the executive sense. A lot of those sopranos retire and become like pit bull executives. A lot of them. Very interesting. So you can destimulate brain tissue where it's more compact in the brainstem and the pituitary area and the thalamus. You can stimulate function. You can stimulate serotonin and acetylcholine release and control cortisol levels, and de-stress the system, as well as dopamine to just give you a general, wow, that felt good. You're oxygenated. Okay, I hope this helps. It's a long lecture. I hope during the process of these lectures that you are oxygenating, and that in itself is a means to an end. So have a great day, everyone. We can talk more in detail about mitochondria, and I look forward to doing that with my colleagues and scientists and researchers here at Johns Hopkins. And they find it very interesting too, because it is such a sound approach to health. It makes all the sense in the world, because it is what it is. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.